Of our program, and there's been a lot of conversation lately. I wrote an op-ed about it on Friday. It's been all over the internet for about a week now. I think a Twitter account called Duty to Warn really started the conversation about narcissistic collapse. What happens when narcissists run straight into the wall? On the line with us is Dr. Bandy Lee, a medical doctor, forensic psychiatrist, violence expert, president of the World Mental Health Coalition, editor of the book The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, and most recently the author of Profile of a Nation, Trump's Mind, America's Soul. Her website is Bandy Lee, BandyLee.com, and on Twitter, BandyXLee1. Dr. Bandy Lee, welcome back to the program. It's been a while since we've spoken. Can you describe for us what narcissistic collapse is and whether or not this might represent a threat to both Trump and America?
Yes, I think you have written about narcissistic collapse, which members of my organization well enjoyed. So narcissistic collapse is a phenomenon where when the narcissism, that is the overblown image of oneself, mainly created for oneself, is collapses because all the props that one has set up in order to deny and avoid one's sense of inferiority, emptiness, and shame no longer work. And that is, of course, that happens with the meeting of reality. And that is why those with these tendencies grow worse and worse unless they are intervened with, and become bolder and bolder the more power is given to them. And that has happened in the case of Donald Trump, who was allowed to finish a full presidency, and for 2 years ensuing, he has not been held accountable. And so it's a very dangerous moment where when his overblown sense of self can no longer be sustained, then there is no limit to the amount of destruction he can wreak upon society, on others, and eventually himself.
Yeah, I drew the parallel to Hitler in his last days, killing Eva Braun and then himself. And actually, for the last couple of weeks, and I think probably that collapse extended through that period, he was, actively ordering the German military to destroy Germany. His generals refused to do it. But he wanted to punish everybody. Is that a characteristic of narcissistic collapse?
That is absolutely a characteristic, and that is, I believe, what the public had a hard time grasping and what mental health experts try to warn against, because it's hard to imagine without having that kind of a personality disorder, really. And because the nation continued to underestimate his dangers, we are very much at such a moment, and it is usually the typical ending of such narcissism run amok, if you will, and turned into megalomania in the presence of a lack of containment.
What, in your opinion, Dr. Lee, could be the kind of thing that would trigger Trump to, for his grandiosity, his narcissism, to experience this thing called narcissistic collapse, and how might it play out? What might he do? What need we be concerned about and be watching for, particularly as early signs that it's on its way?
Well, currently his pathology, if you will, was allowed to spread throughout much of the population. Violence proneness, paranoia, these kind of traits actually spread when there's widespread exposure to an influential figure such as he, a person with this pathology in an influential position. And it has been allowed to continue to spread, especially as the January 6th insurrection was also not contained to the measure which it had to be, and and it became a badge of honor for many. And so the fact that his level of distortion of reality, detachment from reality, and his narrative of having won the 2020 election, but having been cheated of an election, his concept that he's being persecuted by any attempt to hold him accountable, all these psychological dispositions actually increase the longer you leave them alone, the longer that you do not hold them to the standards of the law or the standards of mental health, the more they will swell and balloon into a level that becomes extremely dangerous to society. And that is precisely the reason why we gathered and mobilized as early as the beginning of his presidency in 2017 to first hold the conference at Yale School of Medicine, assembling some of the most renowned members of our field of psychiatry, and published the book, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, which became an unexpected bestseller of its kind. And I believe that was because the public was hungering for this information. Now, of course, since then, within months, the American Psychiatric Association stepped in, silenced us, and developed their own narrative of how we were being unethical, whereas in fact,
the old
we were
Goldwater
trying
doctrine.
to meet. Yes. Distorting it altogether, because it was never meant to be a gag order. It was meant to be a mandate to protect public health and to protect society. And that is one of our primary obligations as psychiatrists, and we weren't able to meet that. We are still willing to, but so much of that discourse has seeped into the media culture that no one expects to hear from mental health experts anymore, even though every time I do an interview, it seems that public hunger again surfaces, and there's a great deal of attention given to it. I did an interview with the Weekend Show, for example, a few weeks ago, and I was also featured in Mother Jones. These articles, if you present at my website, they can be seen there. Mm-hmm. And
BandyLee.com.
The public has.
Yeah. So, we're looking at the possibility that Donald Trump might try to do something extraordinarily destructive, and even if it's destructive to himself, if he's viewing no way out, he may try to take as many people or even his entire country down with him. Do I correctly understand that?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. I mean, his psychic survival is threatened, and no amount of real survival will overcome the need for that.
Right.
That's how severe.
And then my second.
Severe.
Right. And my second question is, what do we do with his followers? I'm assuming that some of them are probably narcissists themselves, and they've used, wrapping themselves in Trump as a way to prop up their fragile egos. And they'll be experiencing narcissistic collapse. And then others are just, kind of like the people who follow Jim Jones. They're the sad victims of his collapse. What do we do with about that? What do we do with and about them? How do we protect those who are the victims? And how do we defend ourselves from those who are the narcissists who, as part of their collapse, might want to start a civil war or something?
Yes, certainly that's a real danger. And because we have allowed the Trump phenomenon to spread, the phenomenon of contagion has been pretty marked, and it's exactly what we feared, that his psychological dangerousness would spread into social, cultural, geopolitical, and civic dangerousness. It's not only in our country where it poses a danger now, but so what do? We stem the spread. In fact, the phenomenon is well known in psychiatry in that because the spread is not the actual primary illness affecting most people, even though you did describe the narcissistic symbiosis that happens. The more widespread phenomenon is what has at times been called shared psychosis, folie à millions, madness by the millions, folie à groupe when it happens in a group. Folie à deux is the best known when it spreads to a co-conspirator or partner. I've seen this a great deal in jails and prisons with gangs, and it also happens with cults. It's the same psychology and same phenomenon. What helps with this is to remove the offending agent, who is the person with the primary disorder, and containing them, separating them from their followers.
So putting Trump in solitary confinement is our best solution?
Yes, people have been debating whether or not he should be indicted. He should have been indicted long ago and placed in custody. He needs to be removed from exposure to the public. That is the first and foremost way of containing this mental health phenomenon of spread of violence and mental symptoms. Now it, of course, will be dangerous either way. There will be, I can't tell you how much I fear what is to, but the safer solution is to indict him, to charge him of crimes that are commensurate to their actual commission, take him into custody, and removing him from the public.
Amen. Well, thank you, Dr. Bandy Lee. It is always great talking with you. I always learn something. Bandy Lee, BandyLee.com, the website, BandyXLee #1 on Twitter. Dr. Lee, thank you so much for dropping.
Thank you for having me.